Hello and welcome back to the Ponding Papaya podcast for your preview of the Belgian Grand Prix. With McLaren fresh off a 1-2 in Hungary, all signs point to another strong weekend in Spa, but Red Bull and Mercedes will both want to end the first half of the season on a high. To preview the final race before the summer break, I'm joined by the Independent's F1 correspondent Kieran Jackson and F1 content creator FP1 Will, so let's get straight into it. So I've got Will and Kieran join me now. First of all, gents, how are we? How are we doing, Kieran?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks. Yeah, looking forward to the final race of what seems like a very long first half of the season. How are you doing, Will?
Yeah, not bad. Recovering from getting back from the race itself. So on minimal sleep, but yeah, not bad.
Yeah, we were just saying before the podcast, Will was lucky enough out to be in Hungary. Like, how was that experience, like as a fan, as well as the weather, and of course the race? You're lucky to get a dramatic one at least.
It was hot, I'll give you that. But no, it was incredible. It's the second time I've been to Hungary, and it's one of the best races that I've been to. So yeah, and as you say, fantastic race to go and watch as well.
Speaking of one of the best races to go to, I think a lot of people will probably say the same about Belgium. Obviously, that's what this podcast is previewing. So if you didn't know, it's the Circuit des Spa-Francorchamps, which is my best Belgian accent, in Liège, in sort of the east of the country. Very famous track, been used since 1950, 19 turns, 7 kilometres, around 44 laps, 2 DRS zones, one on the start-finish line and the other on the Kemmel Straight. McLaren have won here 14 times, and they've only won at Monaco more. Eau Rouge and the Kemmel Straight are probably the two most famous sections of the track. It's also very much known for its weather. I mean, me and Will were speaking just before the podcast started that we were both there last year, and 1 minute it was fine, 5 minutes later it was absolutely pissing it down. So it's that kind of weird place where it has its own little weather forecast floating around it. Last year it was a mixed bag really. Piastri had a really good sprint, finished second, probably one of the few times that Max Verstappen seemed a bit under threat, whereas in the race, not so much. He got squished going to turn 1 by Carlos Sainz, had to retire. And meanwhile, Norris started 7th and finished 7th, his joint best result of the venue. Going into chaps, we'll start with you, Will. What are your expectations of where the field's going to look like? Where do you think McLaren are? Sort of, do you have any other teams that you think might be up there?
I think it's really been blown wide open off these last couple of races. McLaren have looked quick. This was a circuit that, as you hinted at, they were pretty good at last year with Piastri P2 in the sprint. So I'd say it's again going to be a case of McLaren versus Red Bull. We know Mercedes, though, as well, have been quick round there. So I think it's, as I said, the door's open for another surprise winner, I guess you could say, to come in. I say surprise. I feel like that's a bit unfair for McLaren now, but yeah, I think we're in store for an exciting weekend.
What about you, Kieran? Do you think are McLaren going into this race sort of favourites? Obviously, they had such a dominant performance in Hungary, getting their first 1-2 in a number of years. Like, could we see a similar situation of dominance on this weekend?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely possible. It does seem to be that the last 2-3 weeks they've got the fastest car, like particularly towards the latter stages of the race. I think that's something we've seen for like a fair few races now, where even if it doesn't quite happen in qualifying and Max just pips them, or whether it's a Merc coming through, like the latter stages of the race, even in Austria, that's why Lando got up to Max so quickly, and that crash happened. So, I mean, it really optimistic. I mean, what a year to start a McLaren specific podcast.
You're not the first person to tell me that. Weirdly, like, yeah, absolute perfect timing to decide to do it. I mean, what a year we've had so far. You're very much right. Looking at what the sort of drivers said, they're both very similar. I mean, Lando would talk about how this is his favorite, one of his favorite tracks. I mean, I bet Silverstone's right up there as well for him. But weirdly, like, he's never finished above 7th, which I was quite surprised at, considering it's one of his favourite circuits. Usually drivers like a circuit where they go particularly well at. But well, on Lando in this weekend, like, obviously he was sort of on the back foot to Piastri pretty much the whole race last time in Hungary. Piastri took the lead early on and sort of had a really quite dominant performance other than the team orders at the end. Like, are you still putting Lando as sort of your favourite going into this race out of the two? I mean, we'll talk about Max in a little bit, but just on the two McLaren drivers, do you think Norris is going to want to come to Belgium to sort of prove a point again that he's still the best driver there?
I think so, and while I agree, Piastri's performance in Hungary was really, really strong, I still think over the whole weekend, Lando would have edged him. I feel like if there wasn't the I think it was an issue with his gearbox shifting to second gear. There was a technical glitch or something on the start, which is why he ended up side by side with Verstappen into turn one. I think without that, had he had a much better start, he would have run away with that race and managed the pace a bit like Piastri did out front as well. So I'm still going for Lando. He's now got a point to prove and a little bit of reputation, I think, to earn back, given some of the dramas at the end of the race last weekend. So yeah, I think he's going to come out all guns blazing, and he'll be on it.
Well, looking at his season so far, Kieran, I mean, like, how do you assess Lando Norris's performance? Because obviously, along with the team, had quite a slow start to begin with, but then really picked up the last few races. Do you think he'll be happy where he is now, or do you think he'll want a little bit more?
I think he'll want more. I think I've seen a real change in like Lando's attitude, and particularly his comments to the media in like the last few weeks when he's let races like slide by, or race wins slide by, I should say. Like, it feels like it's been a fair few months now where Lando has been competing right at the top, and yet he's still only on one race win. And that's the same as his teammate. Obviously, beyond all the drama that happened last week, I think I completely agree with Will. The motivation will be really high for him this weekend, and I think he's 76 points off Max in the championship. Now, I think deep down, I think he should be around 40 to 50 points off him. I think he probably feels he should be on about 3 wins. I think he let Silverstone slide by. He should have won Austria. Last week he was on the verge. So I think it's really high, particularly before the summer break. I think he'll really want to make sure that he gets off the fact that he's only just won Miami, where he should have won a few more. So I think the motivation will be high, and I agree. I'm backing Lando this weekend. I think it will all come together for him.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of drivers who have motivation very high, obviously Oscar Piastri. I mean, we'll get on to how we do this weekends in a minute, but Kieran, how do you think he's going to feel? Because obviously he's had his first race win, but it's come with, I don't want to say a black cloud, but there was definitely a bit of a, like, not everyone was talking about Oscar winning, were they? Everyone was talking about the team orders and sort of, did he deserve to get the place back, all that kind of stuff. There was a shine taken off it, maybe so. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but either way, it wasn't all focused on Oscar. I mean, he seems like the kind of guy who's never really that bothered about that kind of stuff. I mean, I think he said since that it wasn't even winning the race, he didn't look overly excited. It's like, what do you think he'll make personally in that situation? Do you think he can feel a little bit like he's been tarnished by his own team and teammate?
Yeah, potentially. I wrote about it on Monday, and I think I said it would be like a bit of a sour taste afterwards. Like, I mean, what a moment that you'd have dreamed of your whole career, your whole life, and the way it transpired. Not saying he didn't deserve to win, because he, as Lando said, he won it at turn one with that move, and it was McLaren's fault for kind of ruining the pit stop order. But the way that happened in the last few laps was just uncomfortable and like not a nice viewing. The way McLaren was kind of guilting Lando into change positions, it felt a little bit uncomfortable. And Oscar will never admit it, because he's very mature, very, very much a team player, and he's quite understated in his personality and in his demeanour. But I think you'd have seen like a more exuberant celebration if he'd gone it like from turn one to the checkered flag in front. So yeah, I think it would have left a bit of a strange taste. But I mean, ultimately, he still won a race win, and he fully deserved it.
Mm-hmm. And Will, we saw after when Norris won in Miami, he really seemed like he stepped up a gear, didn't he? Like the next few races, he was very strong. Perhaps a little bit unfortunate not to win an Imola the race after. Obviously, Silverstone went very well. Are we going to expect a similar kind of jump up in performance from Oscar? Because I think with Norris, there was such a level of frustration, wasn't there? He'd been in his 5th season, hadn't won yet, and quite clearly that was getting to him. Whereas Oscar's been in it for a year and a half and has already ticked that box off. He won a sprint race last year. Like, do you think there's going to be a similar level of reaction, maybe, or do you think it might just be a little bit more? I don't want to say mundane, but a little bit more like run of the mill for Piastri. I mean, it wasn't something he was absolutely craving to do.
There's definitely the potential for that, but I think while Lando, as you said, had that big jump after Miami, I feel like Oscar's kind of been more of a slow burner since he started back at the start of last year, he's grown and grown with every race that's gone by, and we've seen that in particular this year. I think he has still stepped up a gear, but those performances go a little bit more under the radar because they're not quite as big, maybe as big jumps as what we've seen from drivers like Lando. So I think we'll have to wait and see on it. We could see a jump, but I still think he's on a good trajectory to the end of the year, the way he's going. And, well, I think if anyone's challenging for the title out of McLaren, it's going to be Norris this year. Don't count Piastri out now for 2025. He's just sort of cooking slowly in the background. And come the start of next year, if he carries on that trajectory, then we're on for a really, really exciting title battle.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think like if you look where Red Bull are, I'd say they've got a similar quality car right now. Like McLaren should be buzzing about where both their drivers are. Like they really should. Like Lando is performing at the top of his game. It's just not quite coming together in terms of being at the top of the podium. And Oscar's in his second year in F1, and he's really pushing Lando very close in a way that Checo is in that Red Bull. So I mean, if I was Andrea Stella, I'd be really pleased with both of them. It's just situations like last week can arise when you've got two drivers right at the top like that.
I was going to raise that point actually. Like in terms of the rankings, I mean, I think going into the year, Oscar and Lando probably would have been near the top. I don't think anyone would put them above the likes of probably Hamilton and Russell, that kind of order. But obviously, with how much both drivers have come on after these 12, 13 races, Kieran, like, what's your sort of top three in terms of driver pairing? So maybe not just a driver on his own, because I think then Max comes into the conversation, but as a duo, as a team, like where do you think those two rank on the grid?
I mean, maybe second, I'd say, behind Lewis and George. It would be my inclination, and then Charles and Carlos at Ferrari in third. I think that's the way I put it. It's very close though, and I just think, well, I think in a similar era where like Mercedes haven't quite got it together, the fact that Russell's got 2 wins, the fact he's beaten Hamilton in qualifying quite a lot this year, beat him overall in 2022, and obviously then you've got Lewis and everything he's achieved. So I think I'd put them just above the McLaren guys at the minute. But it is close, isn't it? It is close.
What about you, Will? Like, where do you think Lando and Oscar are? Maybe this year, but also maybe looking ahead. Do you think? I mean, it's something that Zach Brown said a lot, isn't he? He's always raved that they've got the best driver pairing, and every team principal says that. But looking ahead to the future, in terms of both their ages, it is hard to see another pairing that've got such a solid future for the next few years, isn't it?
Yeah, I would almost argue that based off, if we average out all of their performances from the start of the year, you could say McLaren have got the strongest driver lineup. I mean, now maybe I would put it on a par, maybe second with around Ferrari and Mercedes. But while if you look at, say, Merc, Hamilton has picked up in the last couple of races, but at the start of the season, it was pretty dire. Whereas it's the flip side for, say, Charles Leclerc, who started very strong, but since Monaco has just dipped away. So I think, looking at it from a whole season perspective, McLaren really are up there. And again, putting in those performances that are a little bit quiet at the start of the year, didn't gain that much notice, but now they're up at the front. We're really seeing that partnership pay off. And again, they're also the youngest driver pairings on the grid. So, as you say, setting us up for the future, yeah, McLaren are laughing.
Looking to the very immediate future, then this weekend, a couple of days' time, who are we predicting they're going to be up there with McLaren? Because, I mean, Red Bull obviously have been very strong, but sort of fallen away recently. Mercedes had a weird run where they won 2 races in a row, and they didn't look great in Hungary. I mean, a lot of that was explained by the temperature. Obviously, it's clearly the Mercedes car is very temperamental when it comes to getting too hot. But I think going into this race, I mean, for people who didn't know, Max Verstappen is likely to have a 10-place grid penalty for exceeding his engine allocation. He's done this before. I mean, 2022 is probably his best ever race where he came from 14th to win the race. But Kieran, going into this weekend, he's not going to do something similar, is he? I mean, he's got a lot of quicker cars ahead of him now. He's going to find a struggle to cut his way up through like he did in 2022, isn't he?
Yeah, he could do something similar. I doubt he'll get to first. But I think you could see him getting through quite a lot of cars and maybe on the podium. It just depends on what happens in qualifying, really. I mean, if he qualifies on pole and starts 11th, then he's not got that many cars to get through. If he qualifies 4th, then he starts further down. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, if Max can somehow do it 3 years running when he's had a grid penalty at Spa. Like, we might as well go home. Like, it's ridiculous when he's able to surge through the field like that. But the thing is, why would you not take your grid penalty, your engine penalty, sorry, at Spa? It's the longest track on the calendar, and I can understand why they do it. And in terms of the weather forecast, it's quite interesting. I think it's meant to be raining on Friday and Saturday, but then quite dry and sunny on Sunday, which, regarding Mercedes and their overheating, is kind of plays into McLaren's hands too. And God knows what Ferrari are going to do, right?
Yeah.
Impossible to predict. So, like, I mean, everything's pointing towards McLaren, which is really good.
Yeah, I saw Carlos speaking today. He got asked, "Are you going to be better than you were in Hungary?" And I was like, "What a question! who knows? Who absolutely knows?" What about you, Will? Like, who are you sort of seeing as the potential threats? I mean, we're talking about Verstappen here. Like, let's just touch on Sergio Perez a little bit, because yes, he's been way off the pace this season, but I mean, there's been so much talk about his future in the background, hasn't there? And there's been a lot of talk about these meetings that are going to happen in the summer break, that Helmut Marko's going to visit Christian Horner in the Cotswolds somewhere, and they're going to discuss over coffee Perez's future. Is going to this last race. I mean, this is his last chance to sort of prove himself, prove he belongs there. He had an okay race in Hungary. I mean, Christian Horner said it was his best since China, but he still finished 7th. He wasn't anywhere near the podium, was he? Do you think that's going to push him to be even better, or is it going to push him into see what I'm going to call is the classic Sergio Perez mistake of doing it too hard into turn one or crashing out in Q1? Like, which Perez are we going to get this weekend?
I mean, I thought we were talking about threats a second ago, but
fair point.
Yeah, I think it's over for Checo. I'll be honest. I'm biased as a massive Daniel Ricciardo fan, but I don't know. I'm just not convinced. We've seen these kind of picks up from pace before, and Checo is kind of, he's clutching at straws. I think, was it in Silverstone where he was like, "Oh, I was faster than Max in like FP2." And I'm like, "Oh, great, well done. That's FP2." You know. So I agree. Hungary was a better weekend, but as you said it yourself, P7. When you're saying P7 is your best race in a while, and you're in what is either the fastest or second fastest car, that's a disgrace. And what happens after the summer break? Who comes in to replace him? Obviously, I have a favourite over who I want to go and replace him. Whether I think that'll actually be any better, I don't know. But yeah, I think really the writing's been on the wall for a while, and it doesn't, unless Checo wins this weekend and like takes the Grand Prix by storm, then I can't see him in that car from Zandvoort onwards.
Kieran, can he win? I mean, it's going to take about 6 cars crashing into each other. And like, we were talking about where Norris and Piastri is as a pairing. Like, how much of, I don't want to call him an anchor because that's quite harsh, but how much does Perez drag Verstappen and like, Red Bull down as a duo? Like, he's just well off the pace at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, yeah, down to the 4th best pairing, and only Max holds them up there that far. So, yeah, I mean, I feel for Checo. It's just like when it rains, it pours for him at the minute. Like, I think we're in the Silverstone Media Centre. Like, a journalist behind us, if you remember, Sam said 20 seconds before Checo's crashing Q1. This has Checo crashing out, written all over it, and he's done it 2 races in a row. Like, it's almost got comical, which for Red Bull is just like, you know, it's getting to the stage of like quite embarrassing. I really hope he doesn't put it in the wall in qualifying this Saturday, like just for his own sanity. But I also think it's possibly on the wall. I actually don't think Ricciardo should get promoted. I think Yuki should be given a chance until the end of the year. He's been in AlphaTauri/RB, which is Red Bull's sister team after all, and the whole point of that team is to get drivers into Red Bull. He's been there for 3.5 years, and he's got a contract for next year. So, like, why not give him a shot and see what he can do in the remaining races? Is what I would say. But I'd imagine it's kind of gone for Checo. Can he win this weekend? I mean, he's done all right at Spa before. I know he's been in the quickest car by a mile, but like he's always been. I think he was second last year. Might be wrong, but I think he was. So I don't see him winning. I think he needs a real strong race, like a top 5 finish, if he's going to have any chance to keep sixth.
And yeah, we can touch on replacement a little bit. Obviously, former McLaren driver Ricciardo is one. Will, do you think he's? I know he's favourite for you, but do you think he's still favourite for those within the Red Bull team? I mean, if you read the room or read the rumours, it seems like Ricciardo is Christian Horner's favourite, and Helmut Marko leans more to maybe towards Yuki Tsunoda, who's never really. I agree with you. I agree with what Kieran said. I think Yuki absolutely deserves it, but for whatever reason, he's never really been considered. Like, if, say, Sergio does crash in Q1, are we going to see Ricciardo in that Red Bull car come Zandvoort? I think it's the next race after Belgium.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with both of you. I think Yuki is the best option, but when it comes down to it, it seems that the decision maker in that team now is Christian Horner and not Helmut Marko anymore. The other thing that I've heard is that while on track, Yuki is putting in some fantastic results this year, and if we based it off that alone, he'd be a shoo-in for that Red Bull drive. Surely, off track, it appears that there may be issues behind the scenes. So whether those are true or not, I have no idea. But when you're looking at a top team and someone who's going up alongside Max Verstappen, especially a Max Verstappen of right now, who is maybe not at his happiest with the way elements of that team are being run, as we saw on the team radio in Hungary, you want to make him happy. And out of the three drivers that could slot into that drive between, Ricciardo, Lawson, and Tsunoda, the driver that's going to make him most happy is Daniel Ricciardo. It's a driver that he's beaten in the past, but it's also one that he gets on very well with and could work very well together with. So that's why I can see the move making sense. It's just whether Ricciardo actually has the pace to deliver in that Red Bull car, which, as much as I'd love to say he does, I don't think I've seen enough yet this year to truly confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been fascinating watching both RB and Visa as well, Visa Cash App, see those storylines this weekend. One thing that I was talked about on Media Day was, is there going to be any kind of hangover from the Hungary I'm not going to call it a fiasco. It wasn't really a fiasco, but a situation with McLaren with the team orders. Kieran, do you think that's going to have any kind of effect? I mean, I'm presuming McLaren are going to be absolutely desperate not to put themselves in that kind of situation again. But do you think Norris is going to be like, well, if it does happen again, I want to have it my way this time, or do you think it's just going to be water under the bridge, really?
I think water under the bridge. I think both drivers have been quite mature about it. I was very impressed with the way Lando immediately after the race dealt with it with the media. I thought he would come out all guns blazing, and he kind of didn't. He congratulated Oscar, said, "Well done, 1-2 finish," blah 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 blah. So I was quite impressed by that. I do think it'll be water under the bridge. The only complication arises where if it happens again and they get close together on the track and or the position swaps around, and then you get into a whole conversation about whether there should be a designated number one. But Andrea Stella's been quite clear about it. They're not going to do that for now. He said maybe later on in the season, if Lando's really close to Max, then it might be a different story, which makes sense. But I think for now, they're just willing to let their drivers race it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just pick up on that. Lando said today, speaking on media, he said, yeah, the fact that I kind of clouded over Oscar's first race win in Formula One is something I've not felt too proud about. So, yeah, you're right. He was very much not apologetic, but he sort of accepted the decision. He maintained he was always going to give the position back. It seems the only part of his anger, I don't know if either of you saw this, but in the cool-down room, Hamilton said something like, "Oh, you guys had a fast car today," and Lando just completely snapped it and said, "You had a fast car 7 years ago," and Hamilton sort of like, "What? I didn't mean anything like this. Why haven't it go before?" But yeah, that was probably where he got all his anger out, and that was that. Let's take a short break. We'll come back with a little bit more of a preview and have a look at some of the stories around the paddock as well. So we're back now. We're going to start part two. I'm going to do a little bit of a game. So I'm going to call it this driver or that. So I'm going to start each of you with one of the McLaren drivers. So Will, I'm going to give you Lando, and Kieran, you can have Oscar. So I'm going to go down a list of the current F1 grid, or some of them, not all of them. I want you to tell me Piastri or Ocon. So it's essentially winner stays on. So Kieran, we'll start with you. We'll go with Piastri. So Piastri v Ocon. Let's kick it off. The new Haas driver for next year.
Piastri, yeah.
Piastri or Albon?
Piastri, yeah.
Piastri or Ricciardo?
Careful.
Yeah. Now.
I'll make it a bit easier. Piastri or Stroll?
Piastri.
Piastri or Sainz?
Sainz, I'm afraid.
Okay, Sainz or Perez?
Sainz.
Sainz or Alonso?
Alonso.
And to finish it off, you got a classic 2007 battle here, Alonso v Hamilton.
Hamilton.
So Hamilton's your winner. There you go. Right, we're going to start with Norris for you, Will. Norris v Bottas.
Norris.
Norris v Tsunoda.
Norris.
Norris v Gasly.
Norris.
Norris v Leclerc.
Oh, Norris.
Norris signs.
Oh, it's getting harder. No, sticking with Norris.
Norris v Perez.
Norris.
Norris v Alonso.
Alonso.
And then finishing off, Alonso v Max Verstappen.
Max Verstappen.
There you go. Also, I found out this weekend has a bizarre amount of knowledge about cats. If you want to see that TikTok video, Max can name pretty much every cat under the sun. Let's go around the paddock then. Yeah, I mean, it's like you remember that year when Sebastian Vettel named like all of the F1 grid, no, all the F1 champions over the year. This is Max's version. He can just do every cat. I mean, it was bizarre. I don't know how he knows so much about cats.
There's a joke there, but I can't say
it. Please don't. I don't want to do some bleeping out. I don't want to get sued by various people. I can see where it's going. Anyway, moving on to something a bit more family friendly. A lot of action up and down the paddock. Some few big stories coming out. I mean, we'll go on to Ocon to Haas in a minute because I think we all expected that. But something we didn't expect was former McLaren boss Andreas Seidel getting the sack from Audi. I mean, he was brought in to sort of oversee the Audi project, and he made it not even a year and a half into that, and before Audi's arrived. Like, Will, what's your reaction to that kind of? I mean, they had a lot of talk about problems behind the scenes, a lot of arguments, and in the end, they've essentially sacked both the people in charge and said, "Well, we're not having one of you, but off you go."
Yeah, it appeared as if it's some sort of power struggle between Seidel and Hoffman. And yeah, as you say, Audi just turned around and said, all right, then, both of you can go. Which is surprised, as you say, the whole paddock. And it was interesting watching or listening to Hulkenberg's reaction to it because it kind of blindsided him a little bit as well. And I mean, then you appoint Binotto, which I think must just be confirmation that Audi are not going after Sainz anymore, because I don't think he could put up with another year of Mattia in charge, given what happened at Ferrari. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. In all seriousness, I think Binotto could be a very steady pair of hands, and I think his final few years at Ferrari were overshadowed by what has now been proven to be much greater issues that were impacting the team. So it's exciting. I feel a little bit bad for Seidel, but in fairness, they hadn't delivered this year, and I think he maybe set his focus too far in the future and didn't realise that maybe that approach was damaging the team too much in its existing state. So I don't think it's the last we'll see of him in Formula One. It wouldn't shock me if he ends up somewhere else on the grid. Could even go back to McLaren. I'm not sure they've got a space for him now, but I do feel that what Seidel did in his last few years with that team set them up for where they are now. So yeah, a bit of an odd one, but very exciting for Audi, big name on board, and we'll see what that does, I think, going into next year and then 2026.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, obviously, Seidel and McLaren sort of leaving perhaps at the wrong time, really. Like, do we think that the success would have happened with Seidel there, or do you think I'll come to you and Kieran on this. I wrote in the notes, did Seidel walk so Stella could run, or would McLaren have not have had similar success under Seidel? So do you think the fact that Stella came in made quite a lot of changes? Obviously, they got rid of James Key, who was clearly Seidel, one of the guys that Seidel really likes, went to him with Sauber, split up their technical team, and they've had such success. Do you think that would have happened under Seidel as well?
It's a good question. I'm not sure it would have done. I'm not sure. I fully agree with Will about Seidel's impact on McLaren. Because when he left, they got one podium in that 2022 year. And granted, it was a Red Bull dominant year, but it only really turned around more or less this time last year, and that was when Andreas Seidel came in, and he has been so vocal about team culture and about that putting a huge emphasis on that. And I don't know. All you can really glean from these people is what they say to us in the media, and then their actions. And I always found Andreas Seidel to be a little bit off in front of the cameras. I remember he did loads of interviews with Sky, obviously, and I just thought sometimes he wasn't as thorough with his answer, I suppose, compared to Stella or Zach Brown. So I'm not sure it would have done, and I wonder what's happened at Audi. Obviously, a bit of a shock, and he obviously left McLaren to go to Audi, and it was, why would you not take up that project? It's very exciting, but you need to have half an eye on this season as well, and Sauber are just nowhere. So it's an interesting debate, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to sort of pick up on that Sauber point. I mean, Valtteri Bottas said today, it sort of feels like he didn't go as far as saying it's two different teams, but he said that he's been told a lot of the stuff they're doing is for success in 2026, which obviously he was particularly annoyed about because there's no guarantee that he's going to be there for that season. Still doesn't have a contract for next year. One guy that does obviously is Nico Hülkenberg, and I just want to ask you. I mean, Will, you touched on it. Like, how do you think he's feeling? Because he said, I can read you what he said today. He said, of course they're influential. Speaking obviously of Hoffman and Seidel, he said these are the two guys we did the deal with, so that's obviously kind of an unexpected change. And he went as far as call it a shock. So obviously he wasn't really kept in the loop. He said he got told the day before the rest of the world. Like, how do you think he's feeling that he signed up for this team and now the people that he pretty much agreed to work for have all suddenly gone?
It's sure to be a bit of a concern, but I think if you think about his overall situation, it was really between Audi or Haas, and no matter who is at the forefront of that Audi operation, out of those teams, which one has the most overall potential in the long run, you've still got to say Audi on that. Okay, Haas have made really good strides this year, and strides I don't think a lot of people expected them to make, but at the end of the day, I still think Audi is that better seat for him in the long term. It's just a case of now, can they pick up the pieces of whatever was going on there under Seidel and Hoffman and put them into something that resembles a competent outfit? But he signed a multi-year deal with that team, so he's got opportunities for them to grow, and he can therefore shape that team a little bit as well.
You mentioned Hash there. It's perfect time to segue over to them. Obviously, finally, as something I think we've all been expecting a while, Esteban Ocon confirmed to be joining for a multi-year deal. Kieran, what's your reaction to that news? First of all, from a driver's perspective, I mean, let's look at Ocon first. I mean, he didn't have a huge number of seats to choose from, and he was always very vocal that his future wasn't tied to Carlos's signs, as in perhaps the way a lot of other drivers were. Do you think this is a good move for Ocon?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think he could have expected much better. To be fair, and like it's such a random market at the moment. But there's so many people, so many drivers vying for seats that I think he's just happy that he could really get one down before the summer break. Really, I think it's quite bold from Ayuka Matsu. Like quite excitingly bold. Like to have two new drivers in a team towards the back. He's already stamping his authority on that team, and I wonder how the Ocon-Behrman dynamic plays out. I mean, Ocon's had his problems with teammates in the past, and he'll be the team leader now, and he hasn't really had that before. So like, it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. And yeah, I'm glad the team principal's taken a gamble, because after having this year where there wasn't one change on the driver grid, we're going to get so many next year, which is very exciting. But I think for Ocon, it's a solid move at his point in his career.
Mm-hmm. Just on that relationship, I mean, you're right. Looking back at a lot of teammates that Ocon's had, they've been quite senior figures. I mean, you've had like the likes of Alonso, obviously, and like Ricciardo, and even Gasly now is sort of a more experienced figure. Will, how do you think he's going to get on with Behrman? Because he's not a guy that's always endeared himself to teammates, shall we say. I mean, he seems like a lovely guy off track. Everyone always says that, but I think pretty much every teammate he's had some kind of clash with, even including Gasly the last few seasons. How is he going to get on with Behrman? Because like Kieran said, he wants to be the leader, but I mean, I think we all consider Behrman one of like the top young talents, don't we? Like, how do you think that partnership's going to be next season?
Yeah, I think the way I phrased it in my video on this last week was Haas have replaced Kevin Magnussen with the French Kevin Magnussen. So, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, his history is well documented when it comes to teammates. You could argue that having a rookie, and I'm trying to remember the last time Ocon had a rookie teammate. I'm trying to think if it's ever happened. In fact,
I don't think it's ever happened.
So maybe that puts the pressure off a little bit. Obviously, the whole Ocon Gasly dynamic was particularly explosive given their past, and also Gasly coming out as the team leader despite being maybe less experienced in Formula One compared to Ocon, albeit by maybe a year or two. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's one that I think we'll really have to wait and see to see how it all plays out. Behrman, I think, is also a bit of an unknown for me. I mean, yes, he had that really strong result on the Ferrari in Jeddah, but Formula 2 this season has just not been anywhere near what we expected from him, and that's just trying to adapt to a new car that is perhaps maybe more inclined to the ground effect rules than the Formula 2 machine that he was driving last year. So I think actually the big question mark should be around Ollie at the moment. But again, that's something that we'll have to wait and see on, and maybe that kind of or those issues that he's having anyway in Formula 2 are being dramatized by what's going on with Prema at the moment. There's a lot of kind of cogs in that wheel, and it might not just be Ollie, but yeah, I think it's something that we'll have to wait and see for 2025 for, but it's a big risk when it comes to Haas for next year, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I think for Behrman, Ocon is like a better parameter than Magnussen would be, because I think I'd rank Ocon slightly higher, slightly quicker than Magnussen. So I think for Ollie, it's a really good challenge rookie season to see how he can cope against Ocon, see where Haas's car is at, and because say they go slightly downhill from where they are this year, like the only thing you got to judge him on is against his teammates. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But I think if I was Behrman, I'd be pretty excited, chomping at the bit to see how he can get on against Ocon. Like, he's been in F1 for quite a few years now, so that's a good challenge.
And yeah, Haas finally seemed like they've got some kind of momentum. I mean, there was a slight dig from Magnussen in the press conference today. He said, we've put an upgrade on for the first time in Haas's history. It's worked. So I don't know if that was aimed at Steiner, saying, look, we're actually doing much better without you. They're on 27 points. They're comfortably in 7th, 6 points behind RB going into the summer break. I mean, that's probably a good place to end it. We'll end with predictions, as we always do. I mean, from the sounds of both of you, very confident about where McLaren could finish, but I'm gonna be harsh. I'm gonna get you to give me some actual numbers. So we'll watch your podium, and maybe if both McLaren drivers aren't on that, where do you think they're going to finish?
I'm going to go with Norris, P1, followed home by Piastri, and I'm going to put Verstappen third.
And Kieran, what about you?
Yeah, fairly similar. Put Norris first. I'm going to put... how high is Max going to get? No, I think it's too far, actually. 10 places at the moment. So I'll put Lando first. I'm gonna put one of the marks. Put George second and Piastri third. Let's go with that. Maybe it should be Lewis second, but whatever.
I'm going to go very bottom. I mean, last week I really hesitated about putting Piastri first, and I actually thought it might happen. So I'm annoyed that it did happen the one time I didn't say it would. So I'm going to go again. I'm going to go back-to-back McLaren 1-2s, which would be for the first time since 2010, back in Jensen and Lewis's days. So yeah, I'm going to go Piastri first, Norris second. I think they just look an absolute bullet of a car at the moment. It's going to take some beating in drivers both in form, but we shall see. I mean, it's shaping up to be a very exciting race. Like you mentioned, we've got Weather, we've got Max with a big grid penalty, we've got Checo needed to prove himself. I mean, there's storylines all over. So we'll be back on Sunday to give a full review. But in the meantime, my thanks go to Will and Kieran for joining me today. That's all for today's show, and like I said, we'll be back on Sunday evening for a full recap of the race in Spa. In the meantime, follow us on socials at Ponding Papaya, and also make sure you're subscribed on your favourite podcast app and give us a rating while you're at it. But for now, enjoy the race, and we'll speak to you on Sunday.